Hi, everyone, and welcome to another ERMAC webinar. My name is Deborah Henderson, and I'm your moderator today and also past president of ERMAC. ERMAC, the Information Resource Management Association of Canada, based out of Toronto. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is our LinkedIn group. I'd like to invite you all to join our over 350 members to see what's up and keep the conversation going. And then we also have, just to show you where you can see what we're up to, our meetup group. This is what it looks like here. And again, you search for ERMAC and or our long form of our name. That's a public group. We post our events there. And then, of course, we have our LinkedIn group, which has lots of members as well. Here's our ermac.ca website with lots of resources that I urge you to visit and explore. So today, we're having our session on keeping your business moving forward in a pandemic with eSignatures. This looks like it's going to be a very interesting meeting in that we have today our speaker, Aphrodite Koukoulas. I want to say that the right way. And here's how we get into the details on what we're going to be talking today. So, of course, the pandemic has accelerated the move to digitization and remote work. And now more than ever, interactions and transactions that are traditionally done in person are conducted digitally. Businesses all sizes across different verticals must now find a way to offer their services digitally and virtually. Nothing stops digital business in its track, like needing a signature on contracts and other commercial transactions. I've had personal experience on this as well, trying to sell a house 200 kilometers away from where I live. And certainly corporate culture and custom plays a role. In this session, our speaker from OneSpan, Aphrodite, will dispel resistance to e-signatures due to ignorance about technology, legal concerns, security issues, and the complexity of setting it up. She'll explain the ideal process candidates for these capabilities and demonstrate a simple steps to implementation. From OneSpan, Aphrodite Koukoulas is a senior marketing manager who directs the North American lead generation efforts for OneSpan Solutions portfolio, based out of Montreal. With the focus on sales enablement and campaign management, including webinars and events, Aphrodite has launched hundreds of successful marketing campaigns for regulated industries, including government, banking, and insurance. With over 10 years of marketing experience in the software industry, Aphrodite also brings a diverse and creative knowledge to her collaboration with OneSpan's customers, helping to highlight their successful implementations and ROI at industry conferences, in videos, and on webinars. So welcome, please welcome Aphrodite, and please take over and show us your slide deck there and take it away.
Sure, thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Deborah, for that introduction. And thank you to everyone for joining today and taking time out of your schedules to join this discussion. As Deborah mentioned, yes, I'm broadcasting live from my home in Montreal. It's gotten kind of cold here over the last few days, but I'm really looking forward to spending the next 45 or so minutes with you all. Okay, so without further ado, here is our agenda for the seminar today. So I'm actually going to kick things off by talking about the shift in digitization efforts among organizations of all stripes. So lots of unexpected changes this year. I'm going to talk a bit about those and the impact that they've had on different industries. Next, I'll discuss the top use cases that we're seeing as a top priority for organizations to digitize as a result of the pandemic. And then I'll share some success stories from Canadian companies and how they're leveraging electronic signature technology in their digital processes. And last but not least, I will talk about two main approaches or implementation models that you can choose from when integrating e-signatures at your organization. And finally, time permitting, which I'm sure it will, we will close out with Q&A. So submit your questions throughout the presentation. We will be dedicating time at the end and even throughout the program to answer them. All right. So in many of our virtual events, we do like to kick things off with a poll. I'm not going to push a poll out today, but I'm going to begin with asking a question, and we can sort of talk through the answers here because different organizations may be in different stages of their digital transformation journey, especially where e-signatures are concerned. So quite simply here, is your organization using e-signatures today? So you will fall in one of these three buckets probably. So no, not yet that I'm aware of, yes, in isolated pockets, or yes, across the enterprise. So perhaps you work in mainly a paper-based institution. That's totally possible. Or maybe there's partial automation where employees or customers can start a specific process online, and then they might have to step foot in a physical location to maybe show their ID in person or provide their signature on paper. Or option three, you're completely digital, where pretty much all your processes and transactions can be completed electronically. There's no right or wrong answer here. If you fall in the first bucket, I'll be honest, that wouldn't be consistent with what we're seeing in the marketplace overall, but it would stand to reason that you are joining an e-signature webcast because you are looking to get really educated on the topic in order to move forward and adopt. And I can definitely say that Canada has been a little bit slower to adopt e-signatures than our neighbors to the south. So that's if you fall in option one. If you're in the second, kind of mostly limited, I would say that's pretty consistent with what we see in speaking with prospects and even customers. So even though e-signatures have been around for quite some time, many organizations have siloed e-signature implementations, which, you know, that actually keeps the value from scaling across the enterprise. And if you're in that third bucket, well, that would be pretty consistent with what we are seeing specifically this year, and I'm going to elaborate on that in just a minute. So before I get into, you know, the bulk of the content, what I wanted to also talk about here is just, you know, recognizing that some audience members may not be familiar with OneSpan. So you may know us as Vasco, which is a global leader in multi-factor authentication solutions, or maybe you've heard of eSign Live, which is a leader in electronic signatures. So our e-signature solution is now part of OneSpan's larger cloud platform. Just over 2 years ago, actually almost 3 years ago, in May of 2018, we went through our own digital transformation with some big changes in our brand, which is now OneSpan, to reflect our forward strategy, one that is all about helping organizations secure and enhance every step in the digital journey through our trusted identity platform and underlying digital identity and anti-fraud solutions. And our solutions are trusted actually by more than half of the top 100 global financial institutions. You'll see some of our marquee clients on this slide. We have US Bank, US Army, BMW Financial, IBM, Wells Fargo. These are just to name a few. We are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ with a strong focus in digital security and e-signature solutions. And our company is growing rapidly with a strong financial backing and global presence. All right, so let's talk about this year. I think we can all agree the pandemic has put significant strain on our lives and the way we do business. If we think back to about 9 months ago, every single business around the world, no matter the industry, faced the same challenge and asked the same question. How do I ensure my business can survive this crisis? And almost all industries had to prioritize those processes that they were going to digitize overnight in order to keep business going. Online servicing portals, mobile apps, other remote channels became the lifeline for communication and transacting with customers. Now, the challenge for many organizations early on was the readiness level, right, of those internal systems. So while some had fully digitized their core processes, others had partial to no automation at all. So at the onset of the pandemic, organizations executed continuity plans, right? Together, we looked at ways to contain costs, ensure our staff had the equipment and tools they needed to work remotely. The goal was to protect workers, customers, and of course, the bottom line. And while the pandemic certainly introduced various new challenges, it also accelerated existing trends such as digital transformation, consolidation, and customer-centric initiatives. And similarly, now that many organizations have dealt with these essential kind of business continuity challenges, what we're starting to see now is this willingness and readiness to tackle the next set of challenges that touch the customer experience and revenue generating initiatives, including enhancing digital sales and services capabilities. So in times of crisis, the financial services industry specifically kind of sees this increase in the number of inquiries that it receives. And that's why it's important for this industry to be able to engage in whatever channels are available and most convenient for their customers, right? So in this kind of COVID-19 environment with face-to-face interaction still being limited by physical and social distancing measures, this means that digitally assisted channels become the standard method for customer engagement. So what are the priorities now for institutions? During the pandemic, Celent, which is a leading research and advisory firm that is focused on tech, they ran a number of surveys to gauge the sentiment and top priorities for institutions in response to the pandemic. Now, not surprisingly, you can see that the top 3 responses and priorities were supporting customers during financial distress, supporting remote work for the organization, and lastly, bringing forward new digital channel capabilities, because not having these capabilities would ultimately expose those institutions and make them less attractive to their customers. Now, next they asked, what are the top IT priorities for 2021? So now that the initial shock of the pandemic is over, what is on next year's agenda, right? And what we see here is that the top 3 responses were enhancing digital self-service capabilities, improving digital product origination and onboarding, and of course, operational efficiencies and cost reductions. So where does that now leave us? I think we can all agree that COVID-19 has kind of ushered our world into the next stages of digital transformation and has showcased the art of the possible. We are beyond crisis management at this point, right? Before the pandemic, most new account openings were happening in a branch, but with this kind of physical avenue basically being cut off and branch lobbies were closed this year, account openings slowed down. And that's really no surprise at all, right? So many organizations like banks are kind of like relationship-based institutions, which means it's all about shaking hands and seeing people. So not completely having that right now is having its impact. Now, the good news is that we've seen examples of organizations that are using this time of disruption to reinvent themselves and to start questioning the old ways of doing things. In the past, for example, we would often hear folks say things like, verifications have to be done in person, or we are unable to accept eSignatures. But now we're operating in this environment where regulations are evolving faster than ever before to accommodate the needs of organizations to ultimately serve the end customer in whatever channels are most convenient for them. So nonetheless, I think one of the biggest challenges today as you move to a fully digital process is this need to balance customer experience and security. This isn't a trade-off, right? And you can't think of it as a trade-off between security and user experience, but rather how to deliver both. So offering an experience with the necessary security safeguards while ensuring a frictionless digital experience. In the end, this is all about achieving the highest adoption rates possible, and you want to ensure that your customers or the consumers of your products and services can kind of get through the process in a way that's easy and straightforward, but with all this necessary security checks and balances in place so that the underlying transactions are secure and can be trusted. The last thing you want is a solution that is highly secure, but is extremely cumbersome to use, or the opposite, right? Super easy to use, but not secure enough. You want to achieve the best of both worlds. So, and agreements, they're everywhere. And they are core to running business, from customer and partner contracts to employment agreements to various forms of internal approvals and sign-offs. Agreements for data management professionals, or even financial processes in particular, they can be high risk and high value. These agreements are different from normal documents because they may involve legal commitments and can be subject to regulatory rules about how they are signed and retained. And that's why there's this need for specialized processes and systems to ensure agreements are fully automated and managed effectively. So next, I say, you may have a specific use case in mind for getting started with these signatures, but signing is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere in your organization. And what we've seen in working with many companies, just like, the ones of the audience today, is once you see the value of eSignatures in one area of the business, they'll want to extend the value to other lines of businesses and departments. This graph here illustrates different use cases for eSignatures in the organization. So where you see business to employee or internal signing workflows, business to business, and business to consumer transactions. So as you move from B to E to B to C, so left to right on this graph, transaction volumes inherently increase. So think about an account opening application or a lending process, for example, that typically has much higher volumes than an internal application where signatures are required, such as in an HR onboarding kind of use case. So when you look at your organization, you can use electronic signatures across all of these areas. The last thing you want is to have a point solution for each use case or area of the business. So the key takeaway here is to start thinking about the big picture of eSignatures inside your organization, and to make sure the signature solution that you choose is able to scale across the organization, no matter what the initial use case was. Now today, because of these kind of unusual times and what is now the new normal, and I'm saying that with air quotes because this has been a widely used term, the channel of choice is the remote channel. So at OneSpan, we've seen enormous interest in ensuring that all kinds of companies can offer a completely remote and contactless experience. So remote account opening, and this is led by financial institutions and lenders looking at their existing customers and at how they can help those customers continue to do business with them, but now in a remote way, right? So maybe these customers are looking to open a new credit line or submit a credit card application. So this is really all about answering the question, how do I keep that account opening process happening completely electronic? For loan applications, of course, with people being financially impacted by the pandemic, they were looking for alternative ways to pay their rent, mortgage, or even a car loan. Wealth management, this was hit overnight. This is an area that traditionally banks don't specialize and invest in modernizing with technology. But overnight, things had to dramatically change in that area in order for wealth management advisors to continue to service their clients. So again, remote account opening, loan applications, wealth management, these are top use cases because these are the main areas where customer acquisition, specifically for banks, is a top priority. And this is why digital identity verification has also become a key requirement during the onboarding process. So the goal here is to ensure that an individual claiming the identity is in fact the true owner of that identity and is genuinely present during the process. And to ensure this happens, KYC, or Know Your Customer regulations, have been put in place, and they vary from country to country with different approaches on how technology can meet regulatory needs. Now, the good news is that most countries now allow organizations to verify identities remotely as long as the technology has strong fraud detection controls in place.
So, Aphrodite, what does Canadian law look like? And what does the process look like for, say, new to bank customer?
Yeah, I mean, in Canada, I mean, of course, e-signatures are completely legal, and we do have new account opening processes that are happening completely digital. I actually have a use case with the Bank of Montreal that I'm going to be sharing in just a short while. So I'll kind of walk you through a complete remote mobile account opening process that BMO implemented using e-signatures. But this is a very common use case that we're seeing, and especially now with businesses being, turning to completely remote transactions.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, and then next, what I wanted actually to walk through is I wanted to take the opportunity to show the audience how e-signatures can fit into a larger business process. So sometimes people associate document signing with the act of simply signing a document. It's important to remember that the signing step is part of a larger process or session that requires all of the different elements on this slide that are built into an e-signature solution like OneSpan Sign. So for example here, instead of printing to paper, you'll pass that document to OneSpan Sign, let us handle the e-signing process, and then at the end of it, we'll give you a secure tamper-sealed e-signed PDF that you can push downstream and archive in your content management solution for long-term storage and retention. So your front and back office remain exactly the same. The ideal solution is going to be one that offers flexibility, so you can pick and choose what you need and design your workflows around your specific needs. So step one, how is the customer or employee going to access the transaction? Obviously, participants need to get into that e-sign process somehow, right? That can happen in several ways. It can happen through an email invitation, a link or a button in a web portal. So think about your internet banking portal or any of your existing kind of systems. So that would basically initiate or kick off the process. The next step, I think I went a little ahead there. Your next step is ID verification and authentication. So this will depend on if the signer is a known or unknown participant in the transaction. There is no one way to do this across your use case. So you definitely need and want multiple options for authentication. So think about, verifying government IDs using mobile ID verification. There's login credentials, SMS text codes, challenge response questions, integration with ID verification systems like Equifax or multi-factor authentication solutions like Digipass that provide a one-time passcode. This is essentially what is your step two. Your third step is presenting the documents to the signer for review. Your next step is your data capture. So chances are many of your forms, the existing forms that you're using, that they have text boxes or check boxes or radio buttons or drop-down lists, right? So that data needs to be inserted into the form before it can be signed. We enable you to capture form data at the time of signing and then make the data available to your downstream system. So that's an important piece there. Your fifth step is signing the document. So this is a step that most people associate with these signature solutions, right? There are several options. You can have a click to sign option, handwritten signature capture, or simply an accept only kind of button. So with OneSpan Sign, you can select your capture method that is most appropriate for the role or the channel. If you want to add a second level of authentication, you can require signers to re-authenticate at the point of signing. For example, you can use a local signing certificate stored on a smart card and token or derived credentials or third-party authenticators such as Digipass, as well as biometrics, actually to validate the identity of the signer before the signing process can actually be completed. Your next step is going to be doc insertion. So this is one of those steps that may or may not apply to your particular use case. But as an example, let's say, we were talking about wealth management advisors before. So think of, a wealth management advisor in the field meeting with a new client. That rep may want to upload some additional proof of a client's ID. They could take a photo of a driver's license, for example, and upload it to the signature workflow. And then your last step there is document delivery. So your documents are delivered to your backend system. Your customer receives an email with the e-sign document as an attachment or with a link to where they can securely download the document. All right. So what I wanted to do now was talk about some success stories. I'm going to get to the BMO success story in I think that's my third one. But first, what I wanted to do was talk about BDC and a few other Canadian organizations that have digitized their business. So BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, this is the only Canadian bank devoted exclusively to entrepreneurs, complementing the role played by the private sector financial institutions. So they've helped over 60,000 entrepreneurs with flexible financing, advisory services, and specialized investment services, right? So with BDC's unique position as a Canadian Crown corporation, they really kind of strive to maintain exceptional customer service, and they're constantly kind of looking for that right balance between secure technology and engaging customer experience. And they identified an opportunity to save their account managers time while approving business loans faster. So they implemented eSignatures as part of that digital application process for existing customers that are pre-approved for additional credit. Now, back to their history here. So BDC's account managers work remotely approximately 70% of the time. This was a problem when it came to moving the loan application process from paper to digital. So essentially, BDC needed to improve their service without compromising on the face-to-face connections that their customers really value. And another major concern was managing the risk of these mobile transactions. So documents needed to be securely e-signed and embedded with strong audit trails that recorded every action taken throughout that signing process. And BDC's solution was to launch a new mobile app that would improve the service provided by the account manager while maintaining in-person connections. This was powered by OneSpan Sign, and with BDC's Express Loan app, now they're able they've enabled business applicants essentially to sign all their required documentation in a single visit with the account manager. And the early results of this implementation were outstanding. Feedback was so positive that BDC now has plans to integrate the solution to their online portal as well. And as a result, account managers had more time to spend on their clients instead of visiting their office to print documentation in preparation for a meeting. And some of the new mobile app features also met their legal and compliance requirements. So by integrating those e-signatures in their mobile app, BDC was exposed to less risk because their e-sign documents now contain strong embedded audit trails accompanied by eWitness, which is OneSpan's patented visual audit trail. So overall, BDC is a really excellent example of how financial institutions can accelerate their digital transformation through e-signature.
So Aphrodite, I see, sorry, the last slide.
Yeah.
I see that one of the benefits is white labeled app. Can you tell us more what you mean by white labeling?
Absolutely. So one of the, this is actually a really great differentiator, and I'm happy that you're asking that. So branding will give you an option to add your logo and customize colors to a web page, right? So there's branding. White labeling, on the other hand, takes branding to the next level. And what this means is that we will completely remove all traces of OneSpan Sign in a transaction. So this gives you complete control over the look and feel of an application. And this includes the content on all the web and mobile pages and all the emails and notifications that are sent to customers from your corporate domain. So this helps maintain trust between you and your customers. So with white labeling, the result is really a more trusted transaction and ultimately a better customer experience that will help drive higher completion rates for the digital process. So white labeling, you don't see OneSpan. Your customers will only see your brand and your name. We're completely under the hood.
I see. So the OneSpan certifications and log trails and so forth are all only on the digital documents on the inside of the company. Anything that goes outside, it's whited out, I guess is
Exactly,
what it is. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for asking. It's a great question. We get asked that a lot. Okay, next I wanted to talk about Affinity Credit Union. This is the largest credit union branch network in Saskatchewan, the 7th largest credit union in Canada. This is also an interesting story because Affinity initially took a methodical approach to e-signatures, keeping in mind their end goal, which was to have an e-signature capability that can be extended across all its operations. But first, Affinity identified mortgage as an area of the business where they felt moderate effort could generate high impact. So they selected mortgage renewals for their e-signature pilot. Now, Affinities, they had a legacy kind of mortgage renewal process at the time that began with an automated notice being sent to a member 120 days in advance of their mortgage term expiring. So a meeting would then be set up with a member to start negotiating rates and terms. But in cases where a member dropped by a branch unannounced, or just happened to be in a branch and willing to meet right away, the legacy process was not ideal, right? And this process was further complicated when joint borrowers were in different cities or provinces. So when it came time for Affinity to evaluate and select an e-signature provider, their top priorities were technical capabilities, market presence, which meant partnering with an established player, e-signature player, and branding options so that there was no confusion among their members about who they were receiving e-sign email notifications from, right? So that white labeling ability again. And this was really quite key for them. So, and then of course they wanted security. So a lot of e-signature providers are cloud-based, but they wanted to make sure that from both an IT and compliance side that all of their boxes were checked. And with all of these requirements laid out, essentially they did select OneSpan as their e-signature provider and have not only been using OneSpan Sign for several years for their mortgage, but they've also recently increased their volumes as a result of the pandemic. And lastly, here is BMO, Bank of Montreal. This is a great example of process digitization. So BMO, we all know this bank, of course, is the 8th largest bank in North America, more than 12 million customers. So they looked at all the paper in their ecosystem and calculated that by going paperless, they would save $98 million annually, or 1.6 billion sheets of paper, which if laid out, that would get you to the moon and back. Okay, so this is the savings that BMO has realized. They found that without digital options like mobile optimized features, their consumers, especially millennials, who would use mobile as their first touch point, were forced to use a different channel or revert to paper-based processes. So this created friction and led to process abandonment. So by moving to a fully digital process powered by e-signatures, BMO was able to better leverage their mobile channel to speed up their account opening processes. And now customers can open a bank account in less than 8 minutes using their smartphone. So the process is highly optimized, reducing the number of forms from 44 to 26, and the number of steps is reduced from 25 to 13. So just a really great success story there. All right, so with that, now let's take a look at the 2 main ways that organizations can implement e-signatures in their digital processes. So the first one is the user-initiated process. And this model largely satisfies the most common internal kind of signing workflows, any contracting use cases. At the most basic level, think about getting contracts and agreements electronically signed. So this is actually the perfect place to dip your toes into because there's absolutely no development required. You simply upload your documents, select your signers, and begin e-signing in minutes. The second model is the integrated model, and that's really for a system-generated process. So contrary to the user-initiated model, this model or this approach gives the ability to add e-signing capabilities into your own application. So that's whether through your website, your mobile app, or any core system. Now, OneSpan does have an open industry standard REST API as well as fully supported SDKs for Java, .NET, Apex, iOS, and Android. And that'll help embed e-signing capabilities into any one of your applications. Typically, organizations that process high volume transactions will go with an integrated approach because there are a number of business rules that they can enforce in the workflow, and that enables basically completely end-to-end digital processes with these signatures. Now, both of these options, though, they provide operational efficiencies, both improve the customer experience and reduce document errors. But each of these comes with its own set of advantages. So in the next couple of slides, what I'm going to do is walk you through each one of these implementation models to help you decide which kind of best meets your needs. Okay, at a basic level, and if you haven't figured it out by now, the user-initiated model is typically ideal for lower volume user-initiated e-signing processes. So again, think about internal documents or HR forms or even forms that require changes to existing accounts. So this is a very simple and straight through workflow. Picture users kind of logging to a web application, a document being added into a transaction, you're adding signers, you're dragging and dropping signature fields to the document, and then you're sending it out for e-signature and you're done. Boom. But if you're going or looking to fully automate the e-signature process with a web or a business application, a course system, or a mobile app, then the integrated approach will be better suited for your needs. In this use case, there is no manual work for employees to prepare a document for e-signature. The documents are actually system generated and completely automated. So unlike the user-initiated option to the left here, this option is ideal for larger volume system-initiated e-signature processes. So think of your customer-facing forms for use cases in account openings or loan applications and mortgage applications. The integrated model in this regard is a bit more complex than the user-initiated approach, but you have the flexibility to enforce business rules throughout the workflow, whether that's adding multiple signers to a transaction, pulling the transaction from a loan origination system, or even adding e-signature capabilities to your mobile app. And then when transactions are completed, you can store them in a repository of your choice.
So, Aphrodite, is it possible to start small with just the document signing and then migrate to the more complex system generated, or are you stuck?
No,
I
absolutely.
mean, I can see you starting with small, isolated proof of concept kind of way, and then with that proof go, oh, I can see a larger solution over here that would be appropriate in a system level with many workflows.
You completely hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what a lot of customers will do. They'll I mean, it'll depend on what the use case is. I mean, both options will provide operational efficiencies. They'll improve customer experience, all of that. But you don't need to pick one over the other. You can really start with a user-initiated model for a couple of your immediate use case, then need digitizing, and then you can switch over to the integrated model for full automation. And that's what a lot of customers will do. They'll start small and then kind of scale.
Great.
Awesome. And great question again. Yeah, so once you're going to decide whether you're going to go with user-initiated or an integrated approach, you'll then need to assess timeline and how long it will take to implement the desired model into your organization. So if you've got an immediate need today and you basically need to get e-signatures up and running in a couple of hours or days, definitely start with the user-initiated model. This is priced by user license, so you can purchase a couple of user licenses right away to get up and running immediately. This is a simple and straightforward process, and will give you all the core capabilities you need to start using eSignatures with your employees and customers. Now, if you're going with the integrated approach for eSignature implementation, this is where it's going to take a little longer. In this scenario, you will most likely be integrating eSignatures to a core system that will pull documents for signers and then store the signed and completed transactions in your ECM, your Enterprise Content Management System or repository. So it will take a little longer to complete the integration because it's more than just adding e-signatures. With this approach, you probably have a larger kind of digital transformation project at your organization. But having said that, you can still be up and running anywhere between 6 and 9 weeks, depending on what your requirements are and the amount of work flow customizations that are needed. That said, once you do figure out what those requirements are, you will be able to easily scale your implementation across different channels, lines of business, and of course, even geographies. So what's probably the most exciting thing about this approach is that you'll be creating a seamless signing experience by fully customizing it with corporate colors and logo and white labeling, again, that signing experience so that signers know that they are transacting with your company. All right. Now, the last thing that I wanted to show you here is a step-by-step guide that can kind of serve as your own readiness checklist for each implementation model. So if you're looking to get on the user-initiated model, simple. You just need the names and the email addresses of your users, so your employees or the agents that are going to be using OneSpan Sign, and you can literally get those accounts provisioned or set up right away. As a next step, you can then also customize the sender and signer interfaces and the email notifications to show your corporate banning. Then you can start really thinking of fully white labeling that experience. So for example, this is where you can get really creative and start thinking about configuring your SMTP with a corporate email address to allow communications to be sent to your signers using your corporate domain. And if you want to control who accesses OneSpan Sign and who is allowed to send transactions out for signing, you can also consider setting up an SSO or secure sign-on, right? Next, you'll want to automate package retrieval. So e-sign documents and their associated audit trails can be downloaded from OneSpan Sign and archived in your organization's storage system. But rather than doing this manually, this process can actually be automated by your development team so that there's no download required. And what we recommend actually is for you to assess at that time, if user-initiated process is scalable for you and if an integration is needed for your organization. So with that, now let's look at the readiness checklist for the integrated approach. Now, with the integration, with this implementation model, as I mentioned a few moments ago, rather, you're going to really be looking at rethinking the experience. Your signing process has probably been on paper until now, or it might be partially automated. So it's about figuring out what steps you can eliminate to make that process more efficient, how you can deliver the best experience to your customers, and how you would incorporate all of that in your workflow. So some of the pieces will take longer because you are rethinking this process. And because of that, you may want to sign up for a sandbox account with OneSpan so that you can test these signatures with your existing applications. Next, you'll want to sign up actually to a community portal to get access to different resources and documentation to help you and your team kind of out along the way. And depending on the complexity of your e-signing project, you may also want to consider working with a professional services team to guide you throughout the process. So let's talk best practices. In working with different organizations, we've kind of recognized that there are 6 critical requirements for a successful e-signature implementation. So first and foremost, it's got to be easy to use for everyone. Signers, senders, developers, these are your key people. That's because signing it's such a universal concept in businesses, no matter your age or position in the company, and whether you're on the front line or a C-level executive or a customer, it's got to be really easy to use. Second, the solution has to have the flexibility to automate any use case across the different lines of business, channels, or geographies. Third, you got to have those white labeling capabilities to maintain trust between you and your customers, and to really help drive completion rates, right? If you know, that's why that's such a key and important piece. Fourth, it's important for the solution to be secure. You want to make sure that the e-signature solution secures the document using digital signature technology to ensure that it can't be tampered with. You also want the solution to capture as much information as possible as part of the audit trail, so that you can reliably and easily prove what happened during that signing experience in the event that you're faced with a compliance audit or a legal dispute. And lastly, it has to enable you to easily scale e-signatures across your enterprise. So whether that's locally or abroad in your particular line of business or another line of business in the organization, ultimately what this does is help you reduce your time to market and is going to lower your total cost of ownership.
So Aphrodite, under most secure, I guess you're using some kind of encryption, but are you using encryption on encrypted documents? So is there 2 layers of encryption, or how does that look?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what you want is you want your e-signatures to be secured with digital signature technology. So it's that hash algorithm that kind of tamper seals each e-signature at the time of signing. So that's exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And lastly, I wanted to remind you of just some integration options available, as well as connectors and platforms that can be integrated with, and that you may already be using. So the good news and kind of the big takeaway on this slide is that if you're already using any one of these connectors in your kind of daily data management processes with Salesforce or Box or SharePoint or Laserfiche, OneSpan Sign can be set up with no hassle at all. So depending on the integration model that you choose, we also have these third-party connectors that are pre-built, no coding required. It's really like a plug and play kind of situation. So that's really great.
Great. It looks like I was reading ahead here to that slide. Thank you.
And really, just to summarize before we jump into any additional Q&A, I'm just going to boil everything down here for you. First, really look at the top business processes that you want to digitize. Next, determine your requirements and the implementation model, be it the user-initiated or the integrated approach that is best suited for your needs. So if you're looking to get up and running with these signatures today, but feel that the integrated model is probably better suited for you, you can always just start with the user-initiated model, then switch. And finally, take the time to kind of figure out which processes directly impact the way you do business with your fellow employees and customers. I spoke about this a little bit earlier in the first half here. I mean, everyone is expecting to conduct business in a safe manner, but they're probably also relying more on remote and online channels to transact with you, especially now as we approach this kind of next phase of what we hope will be the recovery of the pandemic. So with that, I'm just going to conclude here and this portion of the program, but I know that there are probably some more questions here. So I'll pass it over to you, Deborah. I'm just going to take a little sip of water here. Been talking a lot here.
No worries. Thank you very much. This has been really excellent and informative. I'm thinking about the requirements gathering for the workflows and use cases. And I suppose you'd have different kinds of people in the room. I'm thinking legal, compliance, IT, and business process people. Is that typically what you see in the room? And do you do facilitations on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you just mentioned, some of the key stakeholders for pretty much any implementation, big and small. These are the folks that often get involved with our team. Yeah, oftentimes it is somebody in, information security or IT. Definitely, legal and compliance folks want to make sure that, all is well. And then, the line of business owner, who it is that's actually looking to digitize their processes. So yeah, these are often the key folks that are involved in most of these discussions.
And I would suppose that just talking about the workflows may lead to changes in the workflows that are kind of unexpected and are kind of ahas in the moment, which then have to go back to the business to sort out before you can actually move forward.
Yeah, and we've had those discussions too, where it's, we're starting on one use case, and then you see that there's a need to, why not, start, it does why not include another additional use case in the discussion and not just, limit to just that one kind of siloed pocket. So that's what, a lot of our expansion kind of discussions gone there. That's what it's kind of like. It's like a land and expand kind of strategy in some cases, where you kind of go into one use case and then you see that there's other lines of businesses that could benefit from that, those kind of digital processes and that. So yeah, a lot of our
or even processes that have to receive these documents, and how do they receive them and how can they use them? So that would be a natural way to, as you say, kind of land and expand. But
exactly.
But thinking about the use cases, which use cases are most helpful to start showing ROI, or do you rather go in on the most critical implementation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it primarily depends on what the organization's current paper processes involve. What we often will recommend in terms of, an organization that's looking to achieve quick ROI is we'll say, let's look at some of the internal use cases like internal approvals or service agreements, contracting. And we'll start with that. And we can actually, we actually have a tool. We have an ROI calculator that'll actually help you calculate the current cost of doing business on paper and how, what that cost would be like if you switch. So if you have a target use case that you have in mind, I encourage you to visit that tool, and I'll send it out as a resource, because that's actually quite a useful tool that can kind of help determine, where you can achieve quick ROI.
Great. Well, just to assure our viewers, there's going to be multiple links in the description on the YouTube that will be posted shortly for you to contact OneSpan and all the resources that are talked about here. I got one more question for you about fraud and ID management. You talked about that right on that slide, and I'm wondering, is that a OneSpan solution as well as eSignatures, or is that a partner, or how does that work?
Absolutely. Yes, eSignatures is just one of the several solutions that we offer. We do have anti-fraud solutions as well as risk analytics engines. So absolutely, and that'll be included in the links as well. That'll talk to some of the other solutions that we offer. We also have a mobile application security suite of solutions. Adaptive authentication solutions, ID verification, which I touched on because that's kind of tied to our e-signature solutions as well. But yes, there are quite a few others, including anti-fraud solutions.
Sure. So I'm looking forward personally to the day where I don't have to prove who I am, but I think technology is a long way off from there.
We have one question from the audience on YouTube. What is the UI for the signers? Is it web-based or maybe a smartphone app, or is there like any major thing, or do you guys cover everything?
Yeah, it could be on an app, or it could be on it could be web-based as well. It really depends how the transaction is set up. But I can tell you now, actually, I sent a contract to very simply a contract from my manager to eSign today, and she could have signed it using her smartphone, or she could have signed it directly from the web link if she was on her desktop at home. So it can be configured in any way. And there's many options for the sender experience as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sender and signer experience, I should say.
Thank you for the answers. Good.
Right. So I think we're nearing the top of the hour. So thank you very much for this session today, Aphrodite. This sounds really interesting. And, you know, with lots of different ways that can be, your company can solution and expand into these other areas of security, identity management, and so forth. So great to see that some of these companies that we're talking about in our sessions have strong Canadian presence, and I'd like to thank you, audience, for attending today, and please look out for our January session, and that'll be the third Wednesday, as always, in the month, and wishing you a good evening and warm, happy holidays. Signing off for now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.